just had to do this in 2 takes. But yeah, this is something that's true of Western culture overall right now, is the standards for manhood have all but been eliminated, eradicated. Just, there are no standards, and especially in the black community. For young black men, they have nothing to aspire to that says that you have arrived and you're a man. And that's because we don't have intact traditional nuclear families. They're not seeing fathers. They're not seeing men consistently throughout the community. And what came to my mind is because I had a long call last night. And so after I finished my meeting last night at the Trump Hotel, I ended up having a conference call later on that night with a young man who is I'll just say he's a former NBA player who is, making some moves for the second phase of his life. In his late 30s. He's been wise with his money, so he's not one of those typical NBA players who's broke after his career. He's been wise with his money, so he still has money. He came from a solid, stable family background, and like I said, if I mention his name, you would know his name. But he and I connected, and we had a good conference call last night, just talking about things where, finding out where we, whether we agreed on this or that, where we kind of came from the same backgrounds, and what we can do going forward. So, that this is the conversation that was being had was, we need to try to help raise the standard. And, how do you raise the standards, right? You give somebody a standard to hit. You let them know this is life. This is how life can be. And you got to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z to hit those standards. And so we're working together. For example, I'll go in a little bit more detail. I told him about one of my goals and the school that I want to create, and he's on the same page because, as those of you who know me know, I'm a huge Booker T. Washington fan. And what Booker T. Washington was able to do to help bring young men and women up from slavery, well, that's one of my goals. I mean, he was dealing with people who literally had been enslaved, and really they had no basis for anything. But I'm at a stage where I'm dealing with people who have not been enslaved from a physical change standpoint, but have mentally, emotionally, and spiritually been enslaved by cultural Marxism. So what myself and this other gentleman were talking about is, as high-value men, we have an obligation to the community. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying. I'm thankful for my wife, is she realizes that I have men like myself have an obligation above and beyond just our family. Our first obligation is to our family. Let that be known. If you're failing at home, then you're failing. You can't make your focus like, well, I'm going to go out there and do good in the community. Is your home life stable? I'm eternally grateful and thankful that my home life is stable, and I make it a point to hit those, do those things that I got to do as a man and as a husband and as a father. But my wife realizing, and she wanted me to grow to become the high value man that I become, she knew that I needed to have other things that I'm doing, right, to continue to add value in the community. So she doesn't give me a hard time about, like, how much time that I spend networking, how much time do I spend doing business, because that's what high value men do. How much time do I spend? I spend quite a bit of time actually mentoring. What I've found is high value men do that a lot, right? Where you realize that your legacy is the what you've invested in other people. Those are those seeds that come up later on. So yeah, you can't be a high value man who's just focused on making money. The crazy thing is, and I've explained this to some of the young guys I've mentored, it's going back to when I used to struggle financially. And I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just not struggling financially anymore. But going back to when I used to struggle financially, and now I sit there and say, man, making money is a lot easier than I thought. You know, when I was in a trading hours for dollars mindset, you know, it always felt like there was never enough money. And there wasn't, because I was trading hours for dollars. And since there's a limit to the amount of time that you have, there was a limit to the amount of money you could make. But when you start learning a different thought process on earning money, on creating wealth, you start realizing that if you're in the United States of America and you have a money issue, you should drop to your knees and thank God that you only have a money issue. Because earning more money in the United States of America is literally the easiest thing to do. Or let me change that. Earning more money in the United States of America is the simplest thing to do. It's not easy, right? Nothing worthwhile is easy. But there is a simplicity to it. And the simplicity is finding ways to add value to your fellow man. I'm not trying to go off on a tangent, but I will go off on a tangent for a quick second about the way people earn money. And once again, if you're trading hours for dollars, well then that means you're only going to earn income based off of your knowledge, skills, and abilities. Well, first of all, you always earn money based off of your knowledge, skills, and abilities. But if you're trading hours for dollars, you're limited. You know, it's like, here's a great saying one of my mentors said. He says, you know, Chris, from the neck down, you're worth about $10 an hour. Now, when he said that to me, that was a decade or so. So adjusted for inflation, that's $15 an hour, right? So, but from the neck down, you're worth about $15 an hour. From the neck up, you're priceless. So high-value men understand that they need to continue to pour wisdom and knowledge. Go out there and gain knowledge and great wisdom and pour it into here, because this is where you make money. It's your thought process, and then as you're sitting there thinking, you're looking for ways to add value to your fellow man. It irks the heck out of my nerves when I hear people talking about we need to raise the minimum wage. I'm like, why? Why should you be paid more for doing the exact same work you were doing? And usually if you were getting paid minimum wage, it's because you were providing minimum value. How about that? If you're getting paid minimum wage, it's because you're providing minimum value. It's not a statement on your worth as a human being. You get paid for the value of the work that you're doing. You can't make someone value that work at a higher level when there's a whole ton of people with a similar level of knowledge, skills, and abilities. I mean, I think it's obscene that professional athletes make the amount of money they make. But I was at my buddy Ralph invited me to a Redskins game, which is the only way I could go. Only way I would go to a Redskin game is somebody gave me tickets, right? But the only way I would go to a Redskin game is somebody else invited me and you know, paid for the tickets. But it was a game. It was the Redskins versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And and we had really good like end zone type seats, but it was really good seats actually. And we got a chance to watch Patrick Mahomes, who was the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. And he did one play where I was like, that's why this guy makes the money he makes. Anybody who's ever, see, professionals make it look easy. I watched Patrick Mahomes being chased out of the pocket, and he's rolling to his right. And he spotted as he's running away from a tackle, rolling to his right. I saw him throw the ball across his body to his left to hit a receiver who was in motion, running crossways, and hit him right in the hands, perfectly thrown the ball. And I was like, that's why that dude makes $25 million a year. It's because how many men can make that throw? Once, maybe once is luck. Patrick Mahomes makes throws like that all the time. He's developed the skill set to be able to make that throw on a consistent basis, which is why there's 32 teams in the league, which means there's 32 starting quarterbacks. And honestly, of the 32 starting quarterbacks, how many of them are that good that they can, let's just say 65% of the time, how many of them can make that throw? And maybe, we're not, sometimes the receiver drops the ball, but I'm just saying, like, 65, 70% of the time, how many quarterbacks can make the throw and put the ball where the receiver has the best chance to get it? I would say that, first of all, maybe the top 10%, so maybe the top top 3 or 4 NFL quarterbacks are even capable of making that throw consistently, better than 65, 70%. Anyway, just going all off on a tangent, but it just made me sit there and think about, what knowledge, skills, and abilities do you bring to the table that either no one else can do or only a limited number of people can do? Right? And that will tell you, and then on top of that, how valuable is that skill set? Because if you're somebody who can, I've seen people do like weird things where they'll like put a piece of string in their mouth and use their tongue to tie that string into a knot. And that's pretty doggone interesting. That's something that very, very few people can do. But how valuable of a skill is it, right? So it's one thing to have those knowledge, skills, and abilities that are in limited supply, but is it in limited supply and in high demand? That's not in high demand. So that's kind of a case in point. So like, if your knowledge, skills, and abilities are limited to flipping burgers or taking an order at a fast food place, well, guess what? Taking an order is something that is not something that's highly skilled, and at this point it's not even highly desirable, because now they're creating these little kiosk machines where you can go and place your order, and at least you know that your order is taken correctly because you personally input it, and you can place your order on the kiosk as quickly as it used to be back in the day when you would go up to the cashier and tell them your order, and they will screw up your order. So it's adding value, right? High value men are always seeking to create or to develop their knowledge, skills, and abilities to a point where there's a high demand for what they have. And so then they network and they connect with other men to trade their knowledge, skills, and abilities with each other. They're useful to the community. See, that rarely ever happens in a man's life prior to like at least 35 years old. I agree with Kevin saying, listen, I don't have to agree with his delivery on everything. I'm a grown man. First of all, let me say this. I don't understand grown men who complain about another man's delivery. Seriously. You know, I had, when I was young and dumb, I had a doctor whose bedside manner was kind of blunt and to the point. He hurt my feelings a little bit, to be honest, right? But he was the best doctor I ever had, and now, looking back in hindsight, a couple of decades later, I appreciate, one, his competence, because he was extremely competent, but two, the fact that he was, you know, dedicated to his craft, and he told me what I needed to hear in a way that I would definitely hear it, because he hit me dead between the eyes with that truth. And so, for grown men, how do you have a problem with another man telling you the truth bluntly and directly? You're supposed to be a grown man. That's what we do. You shouldn't have to coddle a grown man. I mean, yes, I know we have feelings. You know, we're not, you know, Vulcans. I mean, we have feelings. But as a grown man, another man should be able to tell you directly without, you know, he doesn't have to like insult you and call you a little punk or whatever like that, but he should be able to talk directly to you. And if he doesn't, it's probably because you spent way too much time being raised by and influenced by women. Because if you've been raised by and influenced by men, you're not sensitive like that. Just keeping it real with you. That just is what it is. Boys who've been raised by men are not hypersensitive to someone telling them the truth in a direct and blunt way. And if you're going to be a high-value man, you have to associate with other high-value men, and that's the way we communicate. You know, I got a circle of guys that I connect with, and we talk on a regular basis. And you know, one of them had a little issue going on in his household, and he asked the fellas for, you know, input. You know, we were, you know, sensitive to the fact this was a very sensitive issue, but we hit him right between the eyes with the truth. We gave him, you know, he wanted the perspective of other men, so we didn't coddle him, but we told him what's up. And we also told him where we perceived that he was slipping, right? Because where he was lacking, I guess to use less of a slang vernacular, where he was lacking in his performance and what he was doing that might have contributed to the issue that he had in his household. But that's how grown men talk to each other. If you want to be a high-value man, you have to develop thick skin at some point. I mean, if you're going to be a high-value man, that means you also experience failure, right? Every high-value man has experienced far more failure than he has success. Like I was talking to one of the men I mentor, and this guy's, you know, in his 50s. He's very successful. He's in the medical field. He's actually a high-ranking military officer. But he and I were having this conversation about and we ended up talking about like Kobe Bryant. And you have people who complained about Kobe. And I told him a story where Kobe, I was talking about a YouTube video I saw, and Kobe was saying how Shaquille O'Neal was telling him to pass him the ball, and Kobe was like, yeah, okay, right? And he didn't pass the ball to Shaq, and Shaq told him, give me, man, pass the ball. And after a couple of times, he ended up saying, you know, dude, if I miss the shot, grab the ball off a rebound. You know, but here's the thing. The reason I brought it up is a lot of criticism was levied at Kobe for the number of shots he took, and he has the record for the most missed shots in the NBA. But Kobe also was like either third or fourth in all-time scoring, and he had what 5 rings or however many rings he had. So, do you want to be known? Do you want to have people just say, "Oh, you take too many shots"? Well, but he's made a lot of shots also. It's kind of how it works. I mean, yeah, you missed a lot of shots, but you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. If you're going to be a high-value man, you have to be willing to take shots. You have to be willing to take shots and miss, and then get up and go again as if you never missed. That you're supposed to learn something from the shots that you took and missed, because you actually learn more from shots that you missed. You learn more from failure than you do from success. And there's a famous YouTube video out there with Michael Jordan talking about, and this is, I love the video, and he says something like, you know, I was entrusted to take the game-winning shot, you know, 100 times, and I missed, and so on and so forth, right? And he said, and he basically says, like, I missed X number of shots, and I was entrusted to take the game-winning shot X number of times, and I missed, and so on and so forth. And he says, and that's why I'm successful. I mean, I just had to laugh, because going back to some of the criticism that I heard of President Trump, and people listed all of his business failures. They're like, oh, look at his list of business failures. And I'm like, yeah. And the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 successes that he did have led to him being worth several billion dollars. I mean, this is how I know you're a loser. If you point out the number of failures that a winner has, because you're a loser. You're definitely not a high value man would never point out the fact that this guy who's had huge success with at least one thing, high value man is not going to say, well, yeah, but he failed 9 other times. Well, you only need one big success to become a multi-millionaire or billionaire. Who cares about the 9 times? I mean, just think about that. If somebody says to you, I want you to go out there and be willing to strike out 9 times, but on the 10th time, you're going to hit a grand slam home run to win the World Series. Would you be willing to do that? You know, to go down in history as the guy who hit the grand slam home run to win the World Series. Nobody's going to talk about the fact that you struck out all those other times. But once again, that's a man thing, and that's a big issue I have, is that we're not having man talk like we used to have. And you can, if you were to talk to some of the young men that I mentor, I hit them between the eyes on a regular basis. I tell them sometimes, I'm like, you know, dude, that's stupid. Am I saying you're stupid? No. You know, but I'll tell them that's stupid. Or sometimes I'll say something like, dude, don't be a moron. If you do that, you'd be a moron. And they're like, yeah, okay, Chris. And you know why? Because the men who mentored me, they would say stuff like, you know, Chris, if you did that, you'd be a moron. And I was like, I know this man and what he's done in his life, the value he's brought overall. I want to live a life like he lives. And he's telling me that this is moron behavior. I don't want to be a moron, so I'm not going to do what I was thinking of doing that he's advised against. Now, the interesting thing is rarely ever would they say to me, don't do this. They usually would say, people who do this are morons. Which is kind of like saying, don't do this. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to be a moron, so I'm not going to do that. It's kind of funny how the thinking is. But yeah, anyway, these are just some of the thoughts I was sitting there thinking about being a high-value man. There's a book by J. Paul Getty, right, who at one point was the richest man in the world, if I remember correctly, and he wrote a book called How to Be Rich. The book was not called How to Get Rich. It was called How to Be Rich. Two entirely different things, right? And it was more about like, and it's just like there's another book by John C. Maxwell called How Successful People Think. See, that's one of the things that if you want to be a high value man, you focus not as much on what other people do, but how they think. You focus on the principles, you focus on the fundamentals and principles of success, and then you apply it to whatever you do. Right? I mean, most people don't. I mean, there's a million different ways, a million different things you can do to become a multimillionaire. But when you read books like The Magic of Thinking Big, when you read books like Think and Grow Rich, when you read books like The Master Key to Riches, you start studying, you start understanding universal success principles. You study that and you say, okay, now that I understand these universal success principles, how do I apply them to my life and whatever my endeavor is that I'm trying to use to create wealth? And then it's always advised that you network with other people who are going the direction you want to go or have what you want to have. And speaking so much of young black men in particular, a source of frustration to me is there's like a hostility that I've noticed from a lot of young black men to the idea of being corrected by older men. Case in point, my father is a Gulf War veteran, right? My senior year of high school, he was literally one of the very first people that was in Saudi Arabia. He was there within 36 hours after Saddam Hussein invaded Iraq, Kuwait rather. My father was boots on the ground in Saudi Arabia. Consequently, my father missed the majority of my senior year of high school. I'm grateful that my mom understood me, understood masculinity well enough to know that she did not try to control me. My mother was wise enough to nudge and guide and encourage me to spend time around other older men. So like I would, my father's gone, he's off to war. I'm a senior in high school, but where we lived in a military base housing, we had a neighbor. I was over his house all the time. He probably almost was like, you gotta go home now, Chris, right? I pretty much was only in the house to sleep. Otherwise, I was trying to spend as much time around older men as possible. Because I grew up with that constant influence of my father in the home. And this is one of the challenges that's happening overall, but in the black community in particular, is so many young black men have never had that masculine influence. They've never truly been exposed to the masculine principle, and so when they get it later on in life, even though they really crave it, you inherently crave that as a boy. You crave being around men. But if that constant father figure was lacking, or you have, whatever ill will that you might have towards your father figure as a result of your father towards, maybe he wasn't there, you develop this resentment towards older men in general. And it's hard for you to listen to older men. That was never a problem for me. I was always drawn, I always wanted to be in the room with older men. I've always respected the masculine principle, which is why when I had the opportunity to gain access to coaching and mentoring, I was immediately drawn to that. I mean, you're likely not going to develop yourself into a high-value man without having some sort of example from other older men. And so I would advise you, I'll just say this in closing, if you desire and aspire to be a high-value man, look for someone who either has what you want to have in life, or I guess you could say is what you want to be, and or they are headed, at least headed in the direction that you want to head. When you find an older man like that, humble yourself, be willing to ask him, can you earn his time? My experience has been with it's been extremely rare that those successful men have been unwilling to share their time. Because the more successful a man is, the more he actually wants to pour into other people. Because I'm at a stage where I'm thinking about my legacy. I want to be able to point to this guy and say, let me tell you about this young man. When I met him, he was here. I invested my time and energy into him, coached and mentored him, and he is today here. So even with my mentors, I tell them all the time, whenever you see me on TV, when I've been invited to the White House, when I've been invited to closed-door sessions to talk with members of Congress, and all the things, on a routine basis, I reach out to some of my older mentors and I tell them, hey, thank you. I was able to do that because of what you poured into me many years ago. And of course, I'm always letting people know that how important my father, my parents in general, right, but in this case specifically my father, what a huge influence he's been. And I still value my father. And the funny thing is, if I don't talk to my dad in like 2 or 3 days, he'll call or text me and ask if everything's okay. That's how tight of a relationship I have with my dad. But overall, in terms of that access to that coaching and mentoring, and if you want to be a high-value man, you have to find high-value men and ask them to coach and mentor you. Humble yourself, ask them to coach and mentor you. Go out of your way to earn the right to have their time. Because for them, time is more important than money. They realize they can always go and make more money, but they can't make more time. So if they're willing to give you their time, you need to show the proper level of respect and appreciation for their time. And on that note, I'm going to let y'all go since I've been rambling for a minute. But my goal is always to add value to the lives of other people. And I hope I have added some value here in this conversation. So take care. God bless. Be safe out there.